everybody. Welcome back for Proverbs 23. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for joining me this morning or evening, whenever you are watching this. Thanks for being here. If you've got any questions or comments, please leave those in the comment section below. And if you could, like this or share it out with your friends list or subscribe over on YouTube. All of those things are helpful and I appreciate them. So let's go ahead and get started. So remember, we have made another transition in the way the Proverbs are being presented here. So we went through a long section of just kind of if this then that kind of couplets, if you want to call it that. But now it's kind of more in paragraph form again. Solomon is again writing to his sons. And so we see it kind of flows a little bit more. So you'll see that as we go through today. I'll be kind of doing a few verses at a time. So we'll start with verses 1 through 5. Proverbs 23. When you sit down to eat with a ruler, observe carefully what is before you, and put a knife to your throat if you are given to appetite. Do not desire his delicacies, for they are deceptive food. Do not toil to acquire wealth. Be discerning enough to desist. When your eyes light on it, it is gone, for suddenly it sprouts wings, flying like an eagle towards heaven. So the first thing that we see, it's talking about sitting down with a ruler. So assumedly going to some type of dinner with someone who is over you, whether it's a ruler or a boss. Sometimes it could be like I could see this applying in like work dinners and dinners with clients or something like that. To just be careful when you're in these new situations, how you handle yourself and what you do. So I've heard this in sales, where a salesman will try to get you liquored up so that you will make decisions that you should not be making in that situation. There's also been, there's all kinds of stories of work parties where someone got out of hand and it affected their professional life, that type thing. So what it's saying, I think, is just to pay attention when you're in situations like this with people who are above you, whether literally in the corporate structure or just people that have an effect on your professional life, to be careful how you carry yourself. And it says in verse 2 even to put a knife to your throat if you are given to appetite. So be careful what how you go into these situations, and be careful not to go into them and just kind of eat everything on the table. The word picture here is written in that you kind of don't know whether this person is trying to harm you, or if you don't know if they're trying to poison you, and so you may miss something obvious if you go in with a big appetite and you just start shoving food in your mouth or drink without paying attention. And then 3 is kind of a quick lesson on envy. It says, do not desire his delicacies, for they are deceptive food. So whenever we're in these situations where we're around food and drink that we don't normally pay for, we don't normally have around, just be careful not to let envy sneak in, because these delicacies are deceptive. They're not, they're not the food. Literally, they're not the food you need to help survive your daily life, but in reality, that type of lifestyle is fleeting and it doesn't last. And then it goes into that more in verses 4 and 5. Do not toil to acquire wealth. Be discerning enough to desist. When your eyes light on it, it is gone, for suddenly it sprouts wings, and flying like an eagle towards heaven. So kind of going more into the wealth and desiring or trying to acquire it. So 4 almost sounds like a contradiction, because we just talked about, I believe one day last week or maybe the week before, where it says, a wise man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. So a wise man leaves an inheritance to his grandchildren. You don't do that if you don't acquire wealth. Like that, it's just not, you're not dying with $3 in your pocket and saying, okay, well, $1 goes to my son and $2 goes to my grandsons. And so it almost sounds like a contradiction here. But one thing, what this says is, do not toil to acquire wealth. So don't make wealth your goal. The other times we've talked about wealth and acquiring it, it was kind of a result of being wise. It was a result of wisdom. But it's never, Proverbs has never told us to seek wealth, but just to seek wisdom, and that wealth would come with that. And so there's a small difference there, but it's worth noting. And it points out that wealth, if in itself, if that's what you're seeking, is fleeting. That as soon as your eye, as soon as you feel like you've kind of got it captured, it flies away. So I think we've all experienced this on some level. If you think back to your first job, and you were making some amount of money, whatever it was. I know for me, one of my first jobs was actually at a manufacturing company my dad and brother worked at, and it was just a summer job, and it was like $8.50 an hour, and I thought that was the best thing ever, because all the minimum wage jobs were $7.25 or something. So $1.25 over that was great, and I worked and I could get overtime and stuff like that. So I just thought it was the best thing ever, and so when I was there, if I was thinking, well, if I could ever make $10 an hour, then I'd be rich, man. I could get whatever I wanted and do whatever I needed to and whatever. And then as you get older, you start making more, and it's still not enough. You're like, well, if I could make this much more, I'd be rich. If I can make this much more, I'd be rich. And you just go through this cycle, and as soon as you think you might have it, it's gone. It just flies away like an eagle towards the heavens. Anyway, so verse 6 through 8. Do not eat the bread of a man who is stingy. Do not desire his delicacies, for he is like one who is inwardly calculating. Eat and drink, he says to you, but his heart is not with you. Excuse me. You will vomit up the morsels that you have eaten and waste your pleasant words. So this says, don't partake of the bread or food of someone who is stingy. That that they are typically stingy if they have some type of party or whatever, and they're like, they're telling you, eat and drink, have a great time, but or this is warning you that inwardly they're calculating, okay, well, he's had this many and he's done this much, and so he owes me this much, basically. I recently read a book, I think it was called Give and Take, and it talks about basically three types of people, givers, takers, and matchers, and how givers, just give, and that's what they do. They're not calculating. They just want to be generous. They want to be helpful. They want to be beneficial to other people. And takers are the opposite of that. They're just looking what they can get out of a situation. And then matchers are trying to figure out, okay, well, I did this much, so you owe me this much. And, they don't ever want to be indebted, but they don't want, someone else to be indebted to them either. And so this is saying, be careful when you're around those takers or even those matchers, that if they're calculating, okay, they've done this much, and so now they owe me. And then, just don't waste your time, because verse 8 points out, you'll vomit up the morsels that you have eaten and waste your pleasant words. So even your flattering words are useless if they feel like that you owe them now. Verse 9, do not speak in the hearing of a fool, for he will despise the good sense of your words. So don't waste your time trying to educate a fool. They will despise. They will despise your words, and it's just a waste of time. Verse 10, do not move an ancient landmark or enter the fields of the fatherless. Verse 11, for their Redeemer is strong, and he will plead their cause against you. So in these days, they would set out property lines via landmark. And so, they would have, you go from, this big rock to that tree, and, they would set out their property lines like this. And sometimes their landmarks would be movable. So it'd be like, obviously this doesn't logically make sense, but it'd be like, getting up in the middle of the night and moving your neighbor's fence, right? So that your yard was a little bit larger than it was, and their yard was a little bit smaller. So, be honest in your dealings with your neighbors. And it says, or enter the fields of the fatherless. Take something that belongs to the fatherless or the orphan. And so the theory at this point was, if you didn't have the family background, then you wouldn't have someone to kind of support you. So if me and my brothers came onto your land and took your harvested your crops without you giving us permission, whatever the case may be, we entered your field and took something that wasn't ours. If you didn't have the family structure to come back and try to make that right, you were basically defenseless against that. But 11 points out, for their Redeemer is strong, and it capitalizes Redeemer there because it's talking about God, that God is their Redeemer, and He will plead their cause against you. So He will make sure that He protects and looks after the fatherless, as He does. Verse 12, apply your heart to instruction and your ears to knowledge, to words of knowledge. So again, telling us to take in instruction and try to become wise, to take in knowledge and hold on to that. 13 and 14, do not withhold discipline from a child. If you strike him with a rod, he will not die. If you strike him with a rod, you will save his soul from Sheol. So again, this is not talking about beating our children with rods. But it is pointing out that discipline is necessary, and that by disciplining them, even though they may think that they are dying, and everyone in the grocery store may think they are dying, they are not dying, but that ultimately you can save a child from destruction and death by correcting them early and trying to get that out of the way as soon as possible. That by correcting them young, you can save much headache later. 15 and 16, my son, if your heart is wise, my heart too will be glad. My inmost being will exult when your lips speak what is right. So again, Solomon's talking to his sons. And it says, if your heart is wise, if you grab onto this wisdom and you make it part of your daily life and who you are, that will make me happy as your father. Solomon is saying, and then my inmost being, or just everything within me will exult or be exuberant, will be happy when your lips speak what is right. So when a father hears his son speaking wisdom and is talking about what is right and what is good, that makes him rejoice. And so he's encouraging his sons to latch on to this message of wisdom and internalize it. Verse 17 and 18, let not your heart envy sinners, but continue in the fear of the Lord all the day. Surely there is a future and a hope that will not be, and your hope will not be cut off. So again, kind of going back to this envy, and a lot of times it may appear that sinners have it better off than we do. They have better opportunities or whatever. But if we continue in the fear of the Lord, we know that He has a future for us, and that our hope will not be cut off. Our hope will not be demolished. Our hope will be there, and that He has a hope for us, and He has a bigger plan than what we can see. So we need not envy sinners in their stature, station in life, but that God has bigger plans for us, even though our current situation may not look as good. Anyway, so that's what I've got for today. Thank you for being here, and come back tomorrow for the end of Proverbs 23. Have a great day.